Welcome to the IDP After Show Week 5 preview episode. I'm your host, Jeff Pomazal. In Week 4, we saw some wonderful performances by some IDP stalwarts. Unfortunately, we also saw some highly drafted players go down with some injuries, and it appears that some of those players might be missing some significant time. Not only that, but we're also dealing with Week 5, and Week 5 brings us the start of the dreaded bye weeks. Join Jon Glosser, writer and content creator of Dynasty Nerds, and I in this episode as we help you find some diamonds in the rough as well as some IDP landmines to avoid this week. If that sounds like something you and your teams could use, sit back, listen in, and let's get after it on this edition of the IDP After Show.
This is the IDP After Show.
All right, let's jump right into these players who we have in on our Week 5, John. Who's a defensive lineman that has you pretty excited this week heading into the action?
I'm going to start and try to pick on a team that I guess all NFL defenses are picking on right now, the Tennessee Titans, coming off a goose egg last week in a division matchup. Baron Browning's a guy I really like this week for Arizona. Got two big splash plays that have kind of like swung matchups for fantasy managers already this season, with a interception and a big sack for Arizona. He's playing the second most snaps of edges next to Josh Sweat there, kind of, relegated Zaven Collins back to that like hybrid type role where we don't really know what his usage is and he just becomes frustrating. D-line 74 in the season, 26% rostered across MFL platform that I saw. Titans allowing the second most sacks, 4.3 a game. They actually allow more sacks at home, which this game is. Really do like him this week. His Pro Football Focus grades are not good. You know what I mean? He's not one of these guys that are going to go out and dominate, but he's creating pressures. He's getting there. He's playing the snaps. And in a super plus matchup this week, like love Browning. I think he's a low end defensive lineman that not a lot of people are counting on or might even be getting dropped. But with bye weeks and all this kind of stuff, like, you need players like this to kind of get you through and get you to those weeks so you're not starting those zeros. So love Browning this week.
And I really like that the Arizona Cardinals are playing the Tennessee Titans. This feels like a get-right game. They're kind of coming off that rough loss to Seattle last week. They're going to be hungry to prove something, and what better team to help get yourself right but the Tennessee Titans, who are allowed, like you said, a ton of sacks this season. I think Arizona is a great streaming defense this week, and if you have any defensive line players, like you mentioned, Josh Sweat would be a great call here this week too. Maybe in like a Darius Robinson and maybe some deeper formats, but like Browning's been pretty productive as of late. So I really like this call, and I'll be excited to see on Sunday we can do some victory lapping about the Arizona Cardinals defensive line here. So my call is going to be a little bit across the pond, and he's been a popular name this week, especially since Andrew Van Ginkel has been kind of ruled out already this week, and that is Dallas Turner. Dallas Turner played 100% of snaps last week in Week 4. He had 4 combined tackles. Like I mentioned, no Andrew Van Ginkel this week. He's kind of dealing with a neck issue that kind of lingered from preseason. So this might be a longer-term solution here for Turner. So if he's available, he might be like a rest of the season type of play. Like the Tennessee Titans, the Cleveland offensive line has been like abysmal. Turner might be going up against Yukon Cornelius Lucas. He played 262 snaps this season. He has allowed a league-high 28 QB pressures, leading to 18 hurries, 8 hits, and 2 sacks. And with this game kind of being overseas in England, and the Vikings already having a day of like the week there to kind of prepare for it, they're not going to have that jet lag and hangover like the Browns have coming over. The Browns are also starting a rookie quarterback this week in Dylan Gabriel, so we've got that happening. I think it's the first time a rookie quarterback has made his debut in an international game since like the 1950s. So I can't imagine, there's a lot of track record for success with that. So I just think like with the rookie quarterback starting, he's going to like try to prove himself. The offensive line has been struggling, and Minnesota's defense is like playing really, really well. They're probably one of the premier defenses in the league, creating pressures and generating sacks. So I'm all in on Dallas Turner this week.
Yeah, I mean, it's about time, right? Like those, all those, defensive linemen we had last year, and the breakouts didn't really happen for some of them that we wanted to, and then even going into this year. make no mistake about it, the loss of Van Ginkel is huge. It seems like Minnesota is almost like getting a lot of that production from the interior with Jalen Redmond and Jonathan Allen right now. So it is kind of nice to see that. A lot to unpack here too, right? Like the Dylan Gabriel thing, a rookie quarterback overseas playing against a Brian Flores defense, probably not going to go particularly well. But yeah, Minnesota's defense is playing well. I like Turner. He had a big sack, I think, 2 weeks ago. So yeah, it's nice to see him kind of like flourishing. And it's not a guarantee long term that he's going to be seeing this type of snaps with Grenard and then when Van Ginkel gets back. But it's nice that he's kind of showing something to us right now and giving us that production. And I do kind of like to call out too, right? It's a primetime game for more or less, like for those of us who are awake at that time. You know what I mean? That's the only game on, it's the only show in town. So whether it's going to be a bad game or not, like those guys are going to want to show out because they know that everybody's watching them. So I like it, and it's a big spot for him. I love the call out.
And Aaron Rodgers said something last week about after the game. He said it was crazy that the fans were into it the entire game. I think like he was kind of referencing here in the States when the fans, they kind of ebb and flow during high points and low points of the game. But like the international fans, they are all in the entire game long. It's like 3 hours nonstop chanting, singing. There's a lot going on. He's just said that as a player, you kind of feed off of that. And for somebody who's been in the league as long as he has, like to kind of say that, I think that's kind of telling as far as like what that international spotlight can mean to the players like that. So let's go. Sticking with the same game, you've got your linebacker to start this week. So who do you got here for the linebacker?
Gonna go with rookie linebacker one, Carson Schwesinger. I kind of love what he's been doing lately. We kind of figured, unfortunately, with the injury to JOK to start the season and potentially career there, like it opened up a huge opportunity for him. The Browns linebacker position has been extremely frustrating for IDP managers over the years. To see JOK play so well last year prior to that injury was like really heartbreaking. But Schwesinger, linebacker 33, averaging roughly around 15 fantasy points a game. Again, primetime matchup, and the Vikings just surrendered, I think, 24 tackles last week to Queen and Peyton Wilson combined. Those guys are getting a much-needed rest this week with a bye after getting all those tackles. But, Schwesinger's, the tackle floor has been safe. Love what he's doing. The impact plays are something that I kind of highlighted, or the reason why I think I'm a little higher on him this week. Carson Wentz, right? 10 years in the league, probably hasn't really started like a significant amount of games since like 22, 23, but he has 98 turnovers. So, I mean, I think there's a chance here that the Browns this is probably going to be a little bit more of a defensive slugfest. I think the Browns could get a couple of those impact plays. And, when you're playing with Myles Garrett, there's probably going to be a ball or two on the turf that you might be able to scoop up here and there. So 97% defensive snap share. I think, some of that is, maybe blowout games and things like that. But he's going to continue to be the top option there. Again, playing behind that defensive line, and as good as that Browns defense as a whole is, he's able to, why we loved him as the rookie linebacker one, right? He's able to fly around, make tackles, make plays, and instinctive player, and really fun to watch for, this again being a primetime game for people who don't get to watch a ton of the Browns or don't want to watch a ton of the Browns. The game will be on, and I would keep an eye on him. He's a fun kid to watch.
Yeah, and I think you nailed it too. He's just so cerebral. He's super, super smart. Like he was like an engineering major in college or something like that. Just something super, super smart, way above me. But just him diagnosing plays, already wearing the green dot as a rookie, like 3-4 games into it. And then unfortunately getting to watch him play the Packers that game, like he was just like a heat seeking missile, like on those plays where he was blowing Love up and he was just all over the field. So I think he's just, like you said, he's a fun player to watch. And he's constantly hitting his tackle prop numbers all the time, week in and week out. So I like that one. My linebacker this week, kind of mentioned in the preview there about the injuries. It's Teddye Buchanan. One of those injuries that we saw last week, unfortunately, was suffered by Roquan Smith, drafted by many to be the LB1 this season, and obviously for good reason. And by no means am I saying Buchanan's going to come in this week and be Roquan Smith 2.0 on this defense. But I think this team has been so decimated by injuries, and even before the Smith injury, we started to see Teddye Buchanan kind of take over snaps for Trenton Simpson. And now with Roquan Smith out of the way for probably the next couple of weeks at best, I don't see any reason why Teddye Buchanan isn't going to be almost an every down linebacker kind of going forward here. In the last 2 weeks, we have seen him have an 8 and a 7 tackle performance in the last 2 weeks. Going up against Houston this week, we just saw both of the linebackers from Tennessee have huge games last week. Cody Barton had 9 combined tackles, which is great by itself, but then Cedric Gray went off for 17 combined tackles last week. So on paper, this looks like a really, really good matchup for Teddye Buchanan to just feast on. Baltimore's offense is a little banged up as well in this game. So I think that kind of plays into this positive game script for Teddye Buchanan with this game, not becoming a shootout where if the Ravens get up huge on a team, the other team's going to have to start throwing, and that might negate Teddye Buchanan's opportunity to get some tackles. But I think with Cooper Rush under center, it's more of a one possession game, a lot of running, a lot of Derrick Henry. I think that we're going to see some kind of back and forth here, and I think that plays well to Teddye Buchanan continuing this tackle trend. So.
Yeah, I love that call out. Buchanan burst onto the scene on a lot of waiver wires, even entering week 2. Kind of encourages many people that would listen to kind of scoop him up. We saw the writing on the wall last year with Baltimore and Trenton Simpson. They're not big fans. I wouldn't even rule out if Jay Higgins gets some run, because I just don't think they care about Trenton Simpson's play that much. To your point of the game, I really don't think the Ravens can stop anyone right now. They have injuries, key injuries on their other defensive front, now their linebackers, and in their secondary. This looked like a team on paper that was ready for a Super Bowl run. I think they've given up over 30 points a game to every team not named the Browns. So I mean, it's a defense that's not very good right now. But yeah, love Buchanan. Speaking of the tackle numbers, and it's nice to have a rookie who's like wasn't out there really, you know what I mean? And you're able to scoop them up, and the next thing you know, you got almost a plug and play linebacker every week in some of these leagues, which, as we all know, playing IDP Dynasty Fantasy Football, finding linebackers on the waiver wire is, trying to solve the toughest math problem you've ever found. So yeah, it's a great call out this week. I think he has legitimate long-term value there in Baltimore.
And like you said too, like just trying to find them, and by no means am I thinking he's going to be linebacker 1 this week, but like he's kind of being ranked as a LB5, LB4 this week. But I think the upside is there, and so that's why I'm kind of pushing him up a little bit more. Like if I'm playing in a 2 or 3 linebacker league, I don't feel bad if he's my second linebacker this week. Like you mentioned, especially with the bye, we have a lot of stud linebackers either hurt or on a bye this week. So I mean, I think you can do a lot worse than Teddye Buchanan this week. So. Before we get to the defensive backs, John, I wanted to see, do you see Kyle Hamilton's role kind of evolving this week? Could he be a little bit more of I know he's probably like a DB2 or 3 ranked across so you can't really push him up anymore, but do you see his role on the defense kind of maybe playing that more linebacker-ish role with the injuries?
Yeah, I mean, at no point when I'm watching a Baltimore game do I not think that Kyle Hamilton's the best player on that defense, or potentially on the field, not named Lamar Jackson. So he's all world. So I think whatever they ask him to do, he can do. He's going to rack up fantasy points. But yeah, to that point, like, who knows what the usage looks like, because whatever Baltimore's doing right now is not working, clearly. You know what I mean? So the moving him around, I know like last year we had that debate where he kind of had to move into the deep safety role, and he was still putting up nice numbers, which we don't typically see in IDP. But yeah, I mean, he's one of those guys that when he came into the draft, it didn't really matter where he went, what he played. Like, he's just a gamer, right? Like, so I could see his role increasing, because I don't think that outside of Teddye Buchanan that Baltimore trusts what's going on, and they can't create pressures. I wouldn't doubt if they start sending some exotic blitzes or whatever it is to generate pressures, because that has been a huge problem with that defense. And I mean, I know it's not always the best to be sending a guy who can cover tight ends and mismatch on running backs and help out deep with safeties to rush the quarterback, but you got to do what you got to do to survive at this point until you get Lamar back and Roquan back. So yeah, I mean, I think that's a great call out, right? Like, that his usage might be something we aren't accustomed to seeing, which could be in line for, like you said, you can't bump him up anymore. He is what he is, but maybe he gives you one of those Derwin games, those 40 pointers. So yeah, this could be the week for that.
Those are nice, especially if you drafted him in any of the D up drafts. You could use a little 40 burger in there, especially if you had a
Yeah.
multiplier like 1.25 or wherever you had him drafted. But yeah, those are fun. Fun weeks. Fantasy football can be fun sometimes. So, defensive backs. Who's a defensive back you like a little higher this week than consensus here, John?
So I just wanted to spark some debate because we agree too much. So Isaiah Pola-Mao from the Vegas Raiders, he kind of slid a little bit into this Trayvon Merrick role that they used him for last year, but started off. I mean, last year wasn't bad, right? He had 85 tackles, 55 solos. He's kind of trending on a pace for similar numbers this year. If you're into grades, I would not recommend looking because he is as about a bottom of the barrel as you could get. I mean, maybe like 3 or 4 spots away from being the worst qualifying safety of all of PFF. And I mean, he's a low roster guy, like 5% across both sleeper platforms and MFL platforms. But the good is he's playing 100% of the snaps. He started off the season pretty strong. I think he was averaging about 5 to 7 tackles a game. Last 2 weeks have been extremely poor. Um, you know, in terms of the defense, there is nobody else. They just don't have anybody else. I mean, Jeremy Chin's not doing great either. Like, so I mean, I seen some call outs for Justin Simmons, who's still a free agent, about potentially joining there. Like, that might be something. But if the guy's not on the roster, he obviously can't play. So, but Pola-Mao, still a young safety, struggling in coverage, struggling overall. But, the tackle numbers are there 100%. His 15 solos are 35th out of 130 qualifying safeties. So, the solo tackles, obviously you're getting higher points for those versus your assists. So he is there. I mean, he's not, we're talking dynasty fantasy football and we're streaming defensive backs. There's probably some cornerbacks that you would like to start more, but when you get into this situation, especially with bye weeks and stuff like that, I mean, you're losing Brisker and Kevin Byard this week. All the safeties there in Green Bay, so it's it's a week where normal guys that you would have in there starting every week are not going to be available to you. So it's not a bad start this week, and also it's the Colts. The Colts allowing 17.3 tackles per game to the safety position. There's an opportunity here, right? Like he should, based on the matchup, he should score. If he doesn't score this week, that might be hey, John's an idiot. I'll never follow anything he says ever again. But I know there's a lot more negatives to positives than Pola-Mao, but I like him this week as a streamer, especially in some of those deeper leagues.
And I think like the biggest thing here, like you had mentioned too, is the volume. Like we want our defensive backs playing 100%, and he's doing that. Like you said, the PFF grades are a very very autumnal shades right now. Lots of reds and oranges right now. But the one thing you can't take away is he's playing 100% of snaps. And during the bye weeks, we need that 100% snap guy, and he's right now providing that. And you also said there's no one on the roster that's going to take a spot. Currently right now where the Raiders are sitting, there isn't a piece behind him that's going to take his snaps. They tried to bring in Jamal Adams to play whatever he's playing. They've got Devin White resurrected, even playing a linebacker role there. So like clearly this is a defense that is lacking talent, and I don't think there's anyone that is going to take Pola-Mao's job. So I think that's a solid call. And as we enter the bye weeks, that's again, we could do a lot worse. Where are you comfortable with him as in a start 3 league, a start 4 league? Where's your comfort level with him this week?
Yeah, so a lot of the leagues that I'm kind of like playing in and referring to are some of those, like, you're talking flex spots at this point, right? Like if you can get, hey, I can either start 5 linebackers or I can start 4 safeties or whatever, linebacker I think takes a bigger hit this week for bye weeks, to the Packers and Bears point earlier is you're losing 4 very highly productive linebackers through the first month of the season. So that's hard to replace. So if you are going to look, I mean, another part too is you're talking over double-digit fantasy points a game for Pola-Mao that he's averaging. Some of those really due to like one big week or 1.5 big weeks type of thing. But being able to get, when you could start 10 points in your lineup, you're not, kicking yourself. It's when you're starting the 2 and 3 points and the zeros that are really bugging you. But yeah, I'm looking at him as like a flex spot, right? Like if you're potentially having to waste some fab on a player that you're going to use for 1 week versus, a guy that you already have at the bottom of your roster who has the number one matchup, at least for tackles, for safeties this week, you could, to your point, you could do a lot worse, right? Like, so, and again, if he's in there and you're getting that plus matchup and he puts up a stinker for you, I mean, the writing's on the wall, right? Like it's, I mean, it's not a guy that you're looking to probably roster for the rest of the season. So,
yeah, and like you said, with the roster percentage right now, like he is available in a lot of leagues, so you don't have to spend fab. You can wait till waivers run through and just add them, whenever, and so you're not out anything by adding a player like this. So, good call, good quality deep start right there. I'm going to pick on another player that I've had mentioned a couple weeks ago, and that's Dax Hill. Hill has been one of my favorite late round defensive backs this season, and he really hasn't disappointed. Hill has had 3 double-digit scoring games already this season. He's got games with 9, 8, and 9 tackles, and then he's got a great matchup this week against the red-hot Detroit Lions. The Lions have been clicking on offense. They've been on the field a lot, and some long drives. I think last week they had 2 90-plus yard drives. And Hill is lining up in this ideal spot, this IDP sweet spot that we like. And he's almost lining up exclusively in the box every single time. He's played 260 snaps this season on defense. All but 34 of them have been in the box. Nearly 87% of his snaps have been in that IDP sweet spot. And so we are looking for players that are playing more than 85% of snaps on defense. Well, Hill is playing 85% of his snaps right where we want him to, either on the defensive line, as a linebacker, or in the box, like kind of covering that slot corner position. So he's right near the action all the time. Hill's even listed as a cornerback in some leagues, so that gives him even greater value if you play in a cornerback required league. Like the Ravens without Lamar Jackson, the Bengals are really tough to watch without Burrow, and that means that defense has been on the field a lot. Again, I know he was my call out in week 2, but he delivered with 8 tackles and a pick in that game. So I'm going to double back down again and put Hill in again this week. I think he's got a really high floor, his tackle numbers, but Detroit is just a great matchup on paper right now, and I'm gonna stick with the hot hand here. So.
Yeah, I love it. Dax Hill's trending towards that plug and play starter. I was really high on Jordan Battle coming into. I really do like that safety combo that they have there. But to your point, like Dax Hill's box usage right now is just screaming like start me every week. I'm trending towards like matchup proof. So
Yep.
and getting the impact plays are huge too. And I think like real late in that Denver game, one of the on the Monday night broadcast, it was talked about Al Golden was talking about how Burrow not being in the game is causing him to call the defense completely different, right? Like now he wants to put more guys in the line of scrimmage, try to put more pressure on because he's not getting, what he had anticipated or being able to play with the lead without Burrow in there, right? They're almost behind in every game. Good chance this is probably a similar massacre for Cincinnati. They're probably not going to be very competitive in this game, but I would expect Detroit to have the ball quite a bit. And to your point, those long drives is a great point, right? Like you're on the field for 10, 12, sometimes 15 plays. And a team like Detroit, who doesn't seem like they ever don't want to go for it on 4th down. So, you're getting a lot of snaps out of him, and he's producing off those snaps. So, yeah, I love Dax Hill to the cornerback point. There's a few leagues that I do see him as listed as cornerback. That is just like money in the bank. So, he should be started in all those leagues.
Cheat code. Kind of just piggyback down on what you had said too about Detroit. When you have Amon-Ra St. Brown, Laporta, Jamar Gibbs, David Montgomery all getting snaps, all of those players are getting snaps 6-7 yards from the line of scrimmage, or they're getting and that's right where Dax Hill is living right now. And that's, that's, I don't know, that just screams, like you said, success, and it screams opportunity. And if this game is a blowout, all of a sudden it turns into a run heavy game at the end of the game. Dax Hill is already basically playing like a third linebacker role where he's lining up. He can just, that garbage time works for defense too. So I'm a fan of Dax Hill this season, and like I see him ranked like as a DB4 in some sites and things like that. And I'm like, oh man, if I'm getting him at DB4, especially on a bye week, we're cooking. So we're doing well. All right, before we go to the cold side of the Week 5 preview, just to recap, our defensive linemen to start are Baron Browning and Dallas Turner. Our linebackers are Carson Schwesinger and Teddye Buchanan. At the defensive backs, we have Isaiah Pola-Mao and, of course, Dax Hill. So now we're going to flip the script here a little, John, and we're going to go to the side where we're a little faded and a little cold. Even in bye weeks, these are some players that we're trying to avoid putting in our lineups if we can. So who's that defensive lineman that's got you with the cold pricklies?
Preface, I hate this part. I do it every week for the start sit. You don't love recommending sits, but I understand that it is kind of crucial to setting a lineup. And but yeah, Chop Robinson, kind of the reverse of Dallas Turner, right? Like a guy last year who kind of came on and we were excited going into year 2. But I mean, he has sucked like flat out. I mean, all of Miami's, like Miami almost like invests in the defense like they invest in the offense. Let's get all of this speed at wide receiver. Let's get all of these like high pressure, guys that can rush the passer, and like it just never works out, right? It's like a bad team build or a bad chemistry or whatever it is. But yeah, Robinson, D-line 193 on the season. Just very poor. I think I want to say I read today that Carolina or Miami's top 3 edge rushers, so Jalen Phillips, Bradley Chubb, who's having a decent season, and now Chop together have 14 pressures, I believe, combined through 4 games. It's just, and I mean, like, these aren't great teams that they're playing. I mean, they're teams that they, that are giving up sacks and all that kind of stuff. So, not very good. 41% defensive snap share. Carolina, not the greatest matchup, 4th fewest sacks allowed. They're just, it's like the writing's on the wall for Chop that like if he doesn't get a sack for you, there's a high chance that you're starting a 0, right? Like, in which at the defensive line position in a lot of our leagues, all the scorings, like defensive line are your, kind of your bread and butter, your guys who could swing a matchup in your favor, especially a multi-sack game. Just not good, right? His 78.7 pass rush grade last year was on 565 snaps. This year, his pass rush grade is 46.1 on 105 snaps. So I would say 18% of those snaps that he's played, this year versus last year they're just very poor. Like, and I do think he might be a player that just really needs to be on the field more, and Miami doesn't offer that right now. So it's hurting him. I know the injury in preseason, training camp or preseason, I forget which one it was, but it kind of, he said he would be back, and I don't think he's missed any time, but yeah, the defensive usage there is just not good. I mean, Jalen Phillips hasn't been good either. Kind of expected that a little bit more of coming off the back-to-back injuries. But yeah, Chop was a guy they invested highly in, kind of expected them to fade one of those guys out. I think I even read that with Judon, who they signed like right at season start, even with him, I think that's 3 additional pressures. So I think it was 17 pressures total amongst those 4, which not Judon, but the other 3, you're investing a good amount of your cap space in those guys. And even, I think we talked a little bit in the pre-show, but you're not even getting that production from these. Like you drafted Kenneth Grant really high, right? Like Zach Sealer was like a guy that you could really depend on last year. It's just like you're getting almost nothing from the defensive linemen from this team. Like I said, Bradley Chubb, I think, is having a good year, but not, I think, a good year based off of injuries in the past, right? Like you almost thought that, you almost thought like, oh, he's a fade. He might even be like a drop in Dynasty, but as long as I have an IR spot, I might as well hold on to him. And yeah, it's pretty bad in Miami right now. And obviously the Carolina also one of the lowest teams for tackles to defensive linemen. So you're really looking at, I would say, this unit as a whole as sack dependent, but Chop Robinson's a guy that if you're not able to utilize your taxi squad on like a second year player, he's a tough roster right now outside of deep leagues. It just doesn't seem like, I mean, you got Bosa going down, right? And then like Bryce Huff steps in and you're like, hey, I'm at least getting like points out of that guy or whatever. But like with a 3 to 4 man rotation like this and almost none of them producing, you're like shooting yourself in the foot almost every week as a manager.
I'm glad you brought up the point about roster cloggers, because I've got that coming up in one of my players too. Is Chop Robinson a buy for you right now? Like, I know that you mentioned, like, you know, this roster has to turn over. This team's really going nowhere. They beat the Jets. Congratulations. They've got, you know, 3 or 4 guys right now kind of like holding each other back. You know, Jalen Phillips has been a name that's been in the trade news, rumors, and stuff like that. If that happens, is Chop Robinson like kind of like a buy right now for you? And if so, how much are you willing to like give up? And I know you already prefaced it with like hard to roster right now just because of that, but like the talent's there, the draft capital is there. Like, he just needs opportunity.
Yeah, I think this is where we get into that like team building thing, right? Like if I started the season 1-3 and like I'm looking at my roster and I don't love it anyway, or I had questions going into the season, but like maybe I have Josh Allen or, you know, one of those heroes at quarterback that could win me, you know, amount of games and get me into the playoffs. And, you know, once you get in the playoffs, anything happens. But yeah, I mean, like I think the buy is great in these deep roster leagues. I think in some of these leagues where you're looking at, hey, I have to start 75% of the defensive linemen that I'm rostering, I have to start every week. That's where he's a tough guy to roster,
Yep.
right? Like, I mean, those leagues that you're utilizing taxi squads are beautiful. You know, you typically like first and second year players, stash them there because you're not getting out of them what you expected. But yeah, I mean, I could see outside of the contracts, I could see Miami getting rid of, you know, Phillips or Chubb, but I don't know that another team is willing to take that on, learn a new, you know, have a guy learn a new system, especially when they're not producing very well. And, you know, Miami's just a team that doesn't seem to ever want to give up on like the build that they're making. You know what I mean? Like you have Tyreek Hill and then you're gonna go sign Jalen Waddle to this huge deal as well. And then it's like, and you got to pay your quarterback. So now all this money's invested in 3 guys. It's like you did the exact same thing on defense. And then you got a guy like Tyrell Dodson coming in who was just smashing this year. Like a guy who's like been on 3 teams in, you know, the matter of 2 years, right? Like, yeah, it's just it's a bad situation there. And, you know, like you said, you know, yeah, you beat the Jets, but like, I mean, it's not like it was a blowout win or anything, you know what I
Right.
mean? And you didn't really perform great. And, you know, that defense is not getting better. You know what I mean? A game like that is like those get right games like you're talking about, but, you know, get right to get right back to losing probably a week later.
And that game didn't come without a loss. I mean, they lost Tyreek Hill in that game, you know, so
Yeah.
like they lost a big part of their offense. You know, like I know he wasn't utilized like he was a couple of seasons ago, but he's a playmaker. You get the ball in his hands, and now they lost that. You know, I like Malik Washington as kind of like that, like a waiver wire bye week player, but he's not Tyreek Hill. He's not. He doesn't have the speed. He doesn't have that like that aura around him. So, but this is a defensive show, so we're going to continue talking defense. A defensive player on the defensive line that I'm going to fade this week, and I'm going to duck as soon as I say his name, but Jalen Carter, and I hope he doesn't spit on me for that. But right now, Carter is currently ranked as the DL 38 on a very popular ranking site at the time of this recording. That's not defensive tackle 38. That's defensive line 8. And I think that's a little crazy right now. I think there's a lot of things that are stacked against Carter this week. I think this is clearly the byproduct of name value, name recognition. He's coming off a game where he missed time with a shoulder injury. He was already limited in practice this week. He's expected to play, but players coming into a game dinged up always make me a little nervous. NFL is hard enough to do. I don't need my player hurt going into the game ahead of time. He is off to an extremely slow start this season. He only has 6 tackles, 2 solos, and 4 assists. And that's over the first 4 games. And he has 0 sacks and only 11 pressures. And I know that that's not super like alarming just because he plays the defensive tackle position and we're not looking for that really out of our defensive tackle spot. But considering that he's like kind of ranked as a DL4 right now and we're not getting any pressures or any high tackle floor, that makes me cause some hesitation for me. He's already missed 4 tackles this season, so even when he's getting an opportunity to make some tackles, he's missing them. He's going up against the defensive line in Denver this week that hasn't surrendered a sack yet this season. And I know that Sean Payton is kind of scheming up some designs to kind of scheme away from the strength of this defense. Plus, like I said, half joking, you never know when he's going to spit on a player and get tossed. Not that I see that happening again, but that was clearly a division rivalry game. There was a lot of heated stuff going on, but I don't think that's the same kind of in Denver. But to me, if I play in a defensive tackle league, I almost have to start Carter just because of what I invested in him. But if I play in a league where I start 5 or 6 defensive linemen in a week, I probably could do better. And like you said, it's sad when you invest in a player, but then you can go to the waiver wire and like pick up a Bryce Huff who's at least scoring, and it's tough to move on from a player that you invested early. Like if you drafted Chop Robinson, you're probably taking him in the 3rd or 4th round of your rookie drafts. Jalen Carter's probably in that same boat when he came out as a rookie. And as a manager, it's sometimes tough to just kind of like, you know what, I'm going to pull a Bryce Huff off the waiver wire and plug him into my lineup. But I think that's what you have to do, especially if you're 2-3 or 2-2, 1-2, 1-3, you really have to kind of have to rip the Band-Aid off here. So.
Yeah, I mean, great point too on Carter, right? Like when you're starting almost like the cornerbacks, right? When we're talking, say, defensive backs, right? Like you don't have a problem starting a Cooper DeJean or a Riley Moss, right? Because like those guys are almost like racking up safety level tackles, right? But when you're talking the defensive tackle position and you're starting those guys at just a standard D-line position, those guys either need to have a safe tackle floor or those guys need to be like a la Chris Jones, like sack machines from the interior. I don't want to discredit him as much because I do think teams are severely scheming against how good he is. And you lost a lot of good edge defenders on that team. There isn't really a serious threat, especially now with Nolan Smith going to IR. You have a lot of like almost like developmental type players. You lost Milton Williams, like a lot of guys over the years that, and you're kind of like centric of that defense is him and Jordan Davis right now, but they're not. Neither of them are high tackle guys or high sack producers. So your defenses are able to scheme against that. And, I think it's kind of showing. But yeah, I mean, DL4, I'm not for it this week. You know what I mean? I think even in defensive tackle premium leagues, I know like you're stating and you're 100% right. Like, hey, what I invested in him, I got to start him. But when you're looking at like Jonah Lahu from the Raiders, right? Like kind of coming out of nowhere, but he's producing, over double-digit fantasy points every week. Nobody in the league probably knows who he is, even to this point, outside of the, kind of like the hardcore players. But like starting a guy like that, when you're like you're saying 1-3, 2-2, if you think you still got a chance in turning this thing around and you're not ready to rip that Band-Aid off, you got to make tough decisions sometimes, right? Like, I mean, your favorite sports teams, whether it's, football, hockey, baseball, whatever it is, these guys are sometimes lowering people's playing time or sitting people or doing whatever. Like, I mean, you're the coach of the team, right? Like, you're gonna, your decisions are what's gonna kind of lead you to wherever. But starting guys just on name value I come from speaking from severe experience. It usually doesn't end well. I mean, how many times do you want to start that guy? I mean, there's a flip side of it too, right? Like where, this guy's old, I'm not going to start him. And Bobby Wagner leads the league in tackles for, 6 decades in a row. But like, you got some of these, like, especially at defensive tackle, which is a volatile position as it is, you're, I would say in less than like 6-7% of leagues that don't require defensive tackle are some of these guys being rostered, let alone being started. But to your point, almost every football fan knows who Jalen Carter is, whether it's for spitting or for his actual play on the field. But like, if he's on your roster, you're probably looking to start him. So, yeah, it's a good call out this week. Again, it's not probably the attractive move, but it's probably a move you have to make, when you're competing and trying to win. If you're already kind of a sinking ship and you're trying to, tank without tank, if you will, like, put him in your lineup, whatever happens. Maybe as a blow up game and you can get some actual like draft capital or some players back for him. But as of right now, I think if you're in a highly competitive league, I would be fading this week as well.
I think you made a great call too. With them losing Nolan Smith, they lost, obviously Josh Sweat, Brandon Jones or Brandon uh,
Graham.
Graham. Yeah, thank you. He retired. So they lost a lot of that edge pressure, and like you said, now teams can scheme. They can leave that running back into chip on defensive tackle coming up the middle. And they're not getting that pressure. I'm a huge fan of Jalix Hunt, but he's not there yet. And so he's
Yeah.
not in that mold of causing pressure where all of a sudden now instead of that running back chipping in the middle, they have to send it to his side or the left side or right side. And now all of a sudden that frees up Carter to do more. And like you said, teams can kind of scheme against that. We know the two best players on their defense are right in the middle, right off the center. So let's send some extra help there. Let's pinch, let's get it to the outside and stay away from these guys. So we'll see where that takes us. Now that we call these guys fades, they're going to go off this week because that's just how the nature of the game.
Yeah.
But
I'm well aware.
This isn't your first rodeo, right?
No. Happens to me every week.
Every week. All right. Well, who's a linebacker that you are thinking we should fade, but then everyone's going to get in their lineup this week?
Alex Anzalone, kind of been the pride of that Lions defense for a few years now. Seems like that linebacker that's never been like very like attractive, sexy, however you want to say it, in IDP circles, but he's always there, producing all that. So this year you could tell coming off the injury, I think Father Time's catching up a little bit, but he is like from that like morale and chemistry and like knowing the defense. I think he's a huge piece for them. But Detroit's also one of those rare teams that play three linebackers nearly all snaps, over 80-90% of the snaps. He's linebacker 54 right now in the season, but he's being outpaced by both Jack Campbell, who's a top 12 linebacker right now, and Derek Barnes, which is kind of the more shocking one. A lot of coverage from what like the eye test from what I'm seeing is, kind of obviously trusting him in coverage a little bit more, but only eclipsed 4 tackles once this season. I think he had a 6 tackle game. And then the Bengals just being one of 10 teams this year that have allowed 60 tackles or less to the opposing linebackers. So got to think Jack Campbell's going to be eating up a lot of those tackles. To our point earlier when we were talking about Dax Hill, kind of expect the usage for Detroit's defense to kind of be a little bit lower with some of those long drives that the offense has been producing over the past couple weeks. And then if it does get into that blowout territory, I mean, a 30-year-old linebacker is probably the first guy you're probably taking off the field. So especially when you have Barnes and Campbell in there. So I don't love him this week. His numbers this year haven't been great. Again, he's not one of those guys you're always like depending on to be in like the top 24 of linebackers, but he definitely is capable of giving you those weeks. So matchup dependent, and obviously any team we can barely get teams that are starting 2 linebackers. So when we see one with 3, it's like, seems like it becomes more of a headache.
Yep. Anzalone's been kind of that headache. He kind of capped Jack Campbell's. We were all high on Jack Campbell a couple seasons, and it was like Anzalone kind of outproduced him. It's like, oh, just get out of the way, let Campbell eat. And finally, I think we're starting to see like Campbell starting to take over. But I still think he kind of caps Campbell. Like we're still kind of disappointed every week with Campbell. Like you should just be so much better. You've got the prime role, you got the draft capital, you came out of linebacker, all these things and reasons, but yet Anzalone is just like that annoying long-haired beast in the backfield. They're not doing what we want to do. So, and they did give him a little bit of a roster bump too, didn't they? They didn't sign him to an extension, but they gave him a bonus or something, I think, at the start of the season.
Like
so yeah. So full disclosure on my fade this week, I was a huge Tyrice Knight fan all off season. I was driving the bandwagon. I was firing up the train, whatever analogy you wanted to use, I was on it. I love this kid coming out of college. He had a great rookie season, but then in the preseason, we got this super cryptic injury. He was dealing with 2 different things. One was a physical injury, and then there was this other non-disclosed issue. And so he got robbed of playing a full preseason, and he's kind of slowly working his way back into this role, like during the first couple of weeks. Knight was only really playing like 80% of the snaps last season, so he was kind of on the low end of what we want in our linebacker, but he was super efficient and he was still getting the job done. And he obviously went on to have a great rookie season. But now the season has started. We see Knight kind of slowly ceding snaps to Drake Thomas, of all people. And last week, Thomas actually overtook Knight for snaps. Knight played in just 31% of the snaps last week compared to Thomas's 66%. Since week one, Knight's snaps have slowly dwindled from 74% to 69% to 59%, and then last week, 31%. This is not the direction we definitely want our linebacker 3 to be trending in, especially, at this point in the season. We know that preseason sometimes by some teams is used for, rookie development. Some teams play their starters, but really by week 3, week 4 of the NFL season, we should be seeing in the NFL what we have as a product, and seeing Knight's usage kind of go and dwindle down is very concerning, to say the least. He's definitely unstartable at this position until we get the 2024 Knight version back. He did convert 5 combined tackles last week, so if you can maybe catch a manager in your league kind of sleeping, maybe he have Quay Walker on a bye this week, maybe you can get out from under Tyrice Knight in a trade. But seeing him ranked as a LB3, LB4 this week, I just don't see that being reality. So Knight's definitely a fade for me, and that's painful because I really like Knight as a player, and I hope that he kind of rebounds here. But it's not looking good for week 5 for sure.
Yeah, Knight's a player that really high on last year. Obviously, all the carousel and trading and all that Seattle kind of had coming and going last year, and then all of a sudden an injury happened and to Jerome Baker, and I think this door opened for Knight, and he was, to your point, like highly efficient. But yeah, so sometimes we see this with like almost like the Peyton Wilson situation, right? Like, hey, Peyton Wilson's locked and loaded. He's going to be the linebacker 2. We all think Patrick Queen sucks, so he's going to end up being the linebacker 1, right? And then Patrick Queen, is still going to be Patrick Queen. So, at least we got Peyton Wilson as linebacker 2. Then week 3 happens and Cole Holcomb starts coming in. So you'll see like these where a veteran comes in because maybe he's more accustomed to knowing the defense, or he's a better fit for certain downs. With Tyrice Knight and Drake Thomas Thomas is young too. So right, like so it's like they're in the usage last week was wild. Like Tyrice Knight didn't play a single third or fourth down. It was all Drake Thomas. So like him being a first and second down linebacker is gross and not anything you want for IDP because it's not going to be there, right? Like you're going to need teams to be up on Seattle, which is a very good defense right now and a very good run defense. So you're going to need teams to be up on them for him to be in the game at this point, just for the opportunities to be there. So yeah, it's a very disheartening situation, just because you're not ever looking to drop a linebacker who has any type of usage into the pool so that the other sharks in your league can take him from you, and then he's going to explode and you're going to be kicking yourself, right? Like while you're looking at guys like Troy Dye on the waiver wire and like, hey, all right, maybe he'll be good until Perriman gets back or whatever. Yeah, it's tough, these especially like the year 2, right? Like when you get like a semi-promising year 1 and then your expectations for year 2 are, hey, he's going to be the linebacker, he's going to be this, he's going to be that, and those dreams are kind of shattered like a month into the season. You kind of, who knows though, right? Like again, Thomas is young too, so if he struggles a little bit, you know what I mean? At least they know what they have in Knight. And let's be honest, like this isn't unfamiliar territory to Mike McDonald either. Like he's going to challenge some guys. I mean, my biggest concern about Knight, honestly, is when Amon gets back. What are they going to do with him, right? Like, because Kobe Bryant and Julian Love are very good. I do not see those guys coming off the field. So no. I just don't know. I don't know where he fits. Like this is a loaded defense. Like it's very, very good. It's difficult. Like, I mean, Ernest Jones, I feel like is a very good linebacker. He's like 33rd in the NFL in tackles right now, but you got guys like Julian Love cleaning up, right? You got like Witherspoon coming in and getting tackles. Like it's a tough defense to project, like, and on a week in and week out basis. So rostering the linebacker 2 here is kind of like not something that you're super excited about anyway in terms of like a plug and play starter. You're probably looking at that guy as mostly like in a flex spot. So, I'm with you on Knight. That one hurts a little bit, and I kind of hope that, I mean, for now I'm stashing him. I'm definitely not dropping him. If you are trying to potentially like get something out of him, don't read my waiver wire article this week. So Drake Thomas obviously is going to be your top linebacker ad. So if you could make that trade happen before anybody reads that, you should be all set.
But I think that's smart. I mean, you have to be.
Yep.
You can't just like have the hopium and thinking, this is a player I drafted. He was good last year. That means
Yep.
it's going to be happening this year. You, especially on the defensive side of the ball, you can't be loyal because it's the flavor of the week. You have to be turning your roster over. Especially as you get further away from the ball. The defensive linemen you can ride out a little bit longer because they have a little bit more of a year-to-year consistency piece. But look at the linebackers last year to this year. Go look in your league scoring. Who are the top 12 last year? Who are the top 12 this year? Then do yourself a favor and go look at the top 12 defensive backs from last year, and then look at the top 12 defensive back from this year. You're going to see a lot of different names, and that's every year, And so, like, you do the beginning of the year rankings. That's like almost an impossible dart throw to get. If you get 30%, you are doing really well. Especially at the linebacker and defensive back. That's a pull and pray kind of hope right there to get that one right. So, but speaking of defensive backs, John, who's a defensive back that you are trying to avoid this week?
I'm gonna go back to picking on the Titans. Amani Hooker, a guy I do really like, but last week, I mean, maybe to the point of the linebackers just absolutely eating last week was a reason why. But Amani Hooker was extremely poor last week. DB 87. The Texans are kind of like a middle of the road matchup, like tackle wise to safeties, but he was poor. His grades have been extremely poor. He's never been a player that's going to be like off the charts, like grading wise anyway. But he's always been like that. I gotta say, like, steady, consistent. Like, Amani Hooker's never going to put up those huge weeks that are going to win you matchups, but you kind of like know what you can get. And I mean, he's DB 27 overall on the season, but it seems like it's trending in the wrong direction. 76% starting across all platforms, but his box snaps have decreased over the last 3 weeks. The Tennessee defense is not getting any better. The offense is in a massive rut with a rookie quarterback. It's not a good situation. There's definitely better streaming options out there. Both of my, safeties this week are, in common are kind of in the cellar of the overall PFF grades there. So, they're hand in hand this week. One's a start and one's a sit. And then Arizona being a bottom 10 matchup for safeties for tackles is kind of the big reason here. To your point of like kind of being a get right game. They're in an experiment situation at running back now, losing their top 2 options. But I would imagine that they're still going to try and run the ball. They should be up on the Titans for a good amount of this game. So just don't love the options for Amani Hooker to kind of have a big week this week. And again, you got some defensive backs in the, as I always like to say, at the ever-changing IDP landscape where, good matchups, teams that are allowing a lot of fantasy points per games to defensive backs, especially with buys and stuff. This is a week where, maybe you go to some of those matchup charts and look for a player who has a high tackle floor or a more consistent tackle floor. A player I loved from the Titans that they traded was Jarvis Brownlee, who it seems like every single week didn't really matter. He was a 6+ tackle guy at cornerback, and those guys just aren't rostered in most leagues that don't require corners. He's now with the Jets. So it's just a situation in Tennessee, and L'Jarius Sneed seems to be a very big bust from a free agent signing standpoint right now for them. So it's not a good situation for Tennessee. I'd be kind of looking to fade just about everything from their secondary at the moment.
Unless you play in a punter league, right? He's the only player you want to be playing. So yeah, no, I like this. Not only is the offense in a dismal state, but that whole team is just kind of rough. There's already rumblings about firing the head coach and changing culture, and we're a quarter of the way through the season. We're just about to kick off a week 5, and that's where we're at already. And it's probably not all on any one individual in Tennessee. There's just a lot of like holes to try to fix in one season, and to ask any of those players and coaches to try to get it right in one season and turn it around is a tall task. But yeah, something's got to get done. Then I don't think all the pieces are there right now. So my player for a defensive back that I'm going to fade, and this is a big name and a big player, is Antoine Winfield. Winfield gets the Seahawks this week, which is a pretty tough matchup for opposing safeties. Last week, we saw Budda Baker have one of his worst games of the season with just under 5 combined tackles on the night. Shout out to Scott Soltis last week, who was called Budda Baker as a sit. So that's shout out to him. Winfield is playing a lot deeper than he did in his huge breakout 2023 season. Through the first 4 games of the season, Winfield has played 248 snaps. Of those 248 snaps, 153 have been played deep. That's over 61%, as opposed to the 95 in that IDP sweet spot where we want him to be lined up. Those snaps are being played by Tyke Smith, who has played 247 snaps with 143 of those, nearly 60% close to the line of scrimmage. So almost the complete opposite player that Winfield is right now. Looking at his season a little closer, he's played in 4 games. He only has 1 week with double-digit scoring, and that was back in week 3 against the Jets, who seems to be the get-right team of the night. So this might be kind of a bold take and one that might not be too popular, but outside of Winfield's really solid 2023 season, where everything broke for him, like he had 6 tackles, he had 6 forced fumbles, he had 4 fumble recoveries and 3 interceptions, all career highs. Maybe he is just that 80 to 85 tackle guy with a few splash plays like he's done in his other 4 seasons in the NFL. I know that every draft season he's one of the top 5 defensive backs taken in leagues. I know that he went up in a lot of our D-up drafts, but man, he might be he's an amazing real-life NFL player and a defender, and he's a difference maker on the field, but propping him up as a defensive back each week from a season 2 years ago, I think that's just kind of reckless in my opinion. And especially, with a player on his team that's outperforming him and getting more ideal snaps, he's just this is another great example of why fading the position is such a valuable way to draft and construct your team. So I don't hate Winfield as a player. He's an amazing player. He's like one of my son's favorite Tampa Bay Buccaneer, but yeah, that doesn't score him any points on Sunday or Friday or Thursday or Monday, whenever he's playing for your fantasy team. So
goes to your point of Jalen Carter, right? Like you're starting a guy off of name value, like a lot of, I mean, at least from Buffalo, like a lot of people know who Antoine Winfield is, so obviously they know who his son is. But even that, like, right, like, was a key piece when they won the Super Bowl. Like, what I mean? Having one of his better seasons. Dealt with a lot of injuries. I do not want to take anything away from Tyke Smith being very, very good. Like I think we had a hunch with him playing that star position under Kirby Smart, like for the national championship. Like he has the ability to kind of move in and move out, and not to take anything away is like Antoine Winfield's a little bit of an eraser on the back end, right? Like he can cover up a lot of mistakes and things like that, and it is unfortunately, that thing that we run into all the time is better football player than IDP or fantasy producer. And that happens a lot at the defensive back position. To your point, I know you guys preach it over and over again. Like, I love the defensive back position because there's so many different ways to attack it. I mean, we're in an era of us right now where we're like a four-headed monster at DB. Like Derwin, Budda, Branch, Kyle Hamilton. If you're drafting those guys high, I don't think anyone's thinking anything of it. But when you start to get a little bit lower than that, and I know you bring up pain point, talked about a little bit last week, but like Jaquan Brisker, right? Like we're hoping that he was going to come back and be this, and it's not happening for us, right? Like then you bring in a guy like Byard, who is like the Bobby Wagner of defensive backs at this point. It just seems like he's producing no matter where he is, right? Like so it's tough. Like, and I know I kind of preach sometimes that there's multiple ways to attack it, right? Like I love having Derwin James. I have him on a lot of rosters, and it is a sit and forget is awesome every week. But I have a lot of leagues where it's like it's a Riley Moss, it's a Teron Johnson, it's a Cole Bishop, right? Like I'm looking at guys like that to say like, hey, they're not anything great right now, but the upside I can, and I don't care if I'm dropping that guy next week. right? Like he served his purpose. He did his job for me for maybe a couple weeks stretch. It's a lot more headache on you as the manager because you have to be creative on the way that you do this, right? Like you don't want to your point, right? You don't want to chase Isaiah Rodgers because he just had, broke the mold and had this crazy scoring game because that was it, right? Like, there's a very, very strong chance that that's not happening for the rest of his career, let alone this season. But when you're looking at your waiver wires and you see, oh my God, this guy scored 60, he already has 60 or 70 points on the season. No, why didn't anybody pick him up? Because they're smarter than you are, right? Like they know that. But yeah, not to get too deep into it, but yeah, I love the call out on Winfield this week. I mean, even this season, right? Like Tyke Smith, as long as he's healthy, he showed flashes last year and then kind of dealt with the injuries and some kind of, Todd Bowles hates rookies type of stuff, but he is a key member of that defense right now, and they're very similar to the Raiders. They don't have any depth, like right. Like I know a lot of people aren't big on Servassier Dennis either, but like the options past him suck, right? Like so, there's a good chance that they're playing that guy because the good outweighs the bad. The bad might be like really bad, but like it could be so much worse if we have to
Mhm.
go further down our depth chart. So, yeah, and I mean to your point of kind of like latching onto something that's a couple years old, right? And then what's the hardest thing to predict? Touchdowns, interceptions, sacks, like, yeah, we have a baseline for it, but it's like, especially on the defensive side, we preach that all the time, right? Like you're just interceptions, right? Like, oh man, you remember when Deron Bland had, took like 6 picks back for it? Yeah, like that's just, you know what I mean? Like ride the wave, enjoy it because that's just not something that you can guarantee. So
Yeah, and what has he done since? Has he had Has he had 6 picks since that season? Like, I don't think he
yeah,
has. Like, I don't know if he's played in 6 games, to be honest with you, since
yeah,
that
right.
season. But yeah, it's just one of those. It's maddening because he's fun, real player to watch and things like that. And he had that hot season a couple times ago, and then you're just kind of like, he's going to repeat. He can do it again. But here we are, week 5, and I think he's like ranked. I think he's got in Big Three scoring right now. He's like the 53rd ranked defensive back, and like you weren't drafting him. You were drafting him to be the 5 or the 3rd defensive back, not the 53rd defensive back. So kind of maddening sometimes. So recapping some of the players we're fading this week at the defensive line position, we are Jalen Carter and Chop Robinson at the linebackers, Alex Anzalone and Tyrice Knight, Amani Hooker and Antoine Winfield are our defensive backs. So, John, now we're going to get to the part of the episode where we're going to talk about some players that we just can't figure out what's going on, either from a usage standpoint, a coaching standpoint, an alignment thing. Who's that player that's just kind of having you scratch your head a little bit?
Stick with DBs here, and Jessie Bates will be one, right? DB1 overall in 2023, DB8 last year, DB89 right now in the first month of the season. Obviously, not encouraging. I do think, in terms of not figuring it out, I do think he'll be okay. His box snaps are very consistent. I think right now Atlanta's one of like the least playing the least amount of snaps on defense. I think them and the Bills are just like the efficiency is just not there. So they're just not playing as much. But a huge piece too is you bring in Xavier Watts. You don't even draft. I think I think you bring in Billy Bowman as a free
Bowman, yeah.
agent, and these guys got I think 3 interceptions or 4 interceptions between the two of them. Jessie Bates had that like kind of safe like 80-ish tackle floor, which is fine for a DB. He's going to be right around that DB2, maybe like low end DB1 range. But the interceptions aren't there. The impact plays aren't there, right? The grades are still good. Jessie Bates is still a very good player, but from a fantasy scoring standpoint, do you wonder if adding a guy like Xavier Watts, who's very, very good, does he kind of force Jessie Bates into an Antoine Winfield type-ish role where, hey, we trust Bates more to, quarterback the defense on that back end and, teams aren't going to throw at him as much. Xavier Watts gets, some, and Bowman are getting some of those like cleanup picks and all that. So I do think he'll be all right. I'm confident in the usage. But again, like Jessie Bates probably isn't a guy who's much outside of that range that you were talking about, 5'6", in those D up drafts that people are drafting. And to see DB 89 after 4 games, typically after a month of the season, yeah, usage is all over the place, I mean, especially for newer players or players changing teams and things like that, or new defensive coordinators. But to see DB 89 when you drafted a guy anywhere in the top 10, you're not super happy with yourself. Thankfully it's a position where you could find some streaming options and again force yourself to make those tough decisions. But even the great call out on Buda Baker last week, right? All of the data said, yeah, hell yeah, man, sit him. When you're sitting over that keyboard and that mouse with that button, you're like, yeah, I'm playing Buda Baker.
Yeah.
Like,
Yep.
you know what I mean? So as much as we make it sound like those decisions are easy, we are very well aware, because we're in those positions ourselves,
Yep.
that a lot of times it's very tough to do. So but yeah, Bates right now is a little bit of a head scratcher. I know a lot of people, over the last couple of years, you're coming into 2025 thinking like, I got myself like a, at minimum, a DB, the DB12 on the season, I should be fine. And after the first month, you're definitely, scratching your head. Starting the DB 89 over a month straight is going to cost you some wins,
Yep.
no matter which way you cut it.
Thankfully, this week the decision is pretty easy for you not to start Bates because he's on a bye. But like you
Yeah.
said, week 6 comes around, like you're sitting with that keyboard, you're sitting with that mouse, like what are you gonna do? So he just kind of joins that big group of players where hopefully he can return to form, but he's also really hard because he's got that name recognition and that name value, and he's the type of player I love tearing down. Like if I can get, if I can move any defensive back at any time, it's an auto except for me. But if I can like tear down, like, hey, if I can get a fourth and Xavier Watts for Jessie Bates, 4 weeks ago, that would have been a ludicrous offer. But now here we sit in week 5, like, hey, that's a smash accept. I'm getting equal production, plus I'm picking up a piece. Yes, please. Every day on Sunday, twice. So I got a cheat here for you, John. I'm going to cheat and take a whole defensive unit here, and I'm going to take the Houston Texans linebackers as a player that have me really confuddled right now. We knew this was going to be messy going into the season because they had 4 different players, and so if you have 4, you have none. Algier Shire is probably the only one from this group you can trust. He's the only one that's played more than 90% in each of the games. It's the linebacker 2 spot that has me kind of really confused, and it's kind of a dicey situation. We've got Henry Toto, who played 95, 96, and 89% snaps over the first 3 weeks of the season, but he only played 48% in week 4. EJ Speed was brought over from Indy this offseason. He played in 5%, 5%, 13%, and then last week he jumped up to 56% in week 4. Neither of these 2 players can be trusted right now to be even our linebacker 4, and that's even with the bye weeks going on right now. We also have Christian Harris, who, like the theme of the show has been past big names. He was a name a couple seasons ago until he got injured. He's stealing even a few snaps every game. And so we have this really, really strange mess going on right now. These are the types of players, like you kind of teased out earlier, that are kind of really maddening to roster. And you can't get anything for them in a trade, but the second you drop them, someone else is going to pick them up and put them on their roster. And honestly, maybe at this point, good riddance, right? Maybe by clearing them off your roster, they tie up somebody else's roster and let them deal with the headache. So right now, the Houston Texans are just one of those teams that offensively are kind of not what a lot of people expected them to be. And defensively, I think, what are they, 1-3 right now? They got a win last week. So that is not where, the Houston Texans were kind of predicted to be right now. And maybe this defensive linebacker unit is probably some of the reason for that.
Yeah, we like not love, but like find value in like running back by committee on the offensive side, but like linebacker by committee is like a death sentence. So like that point, like it's almost like a like that massive overreaction, because last year all of the injuries and the suspension, because Aziz is a player that probably could get kicked out of a game at any second because of how reckless he plays. So but Tuatu is very like frustrating, because I think a lot of people have like had him pegged as like he's going to be the linebacker 1 this year, and it was just like I was never like a buyer because I was still on the fence between him and Christian Harris. I think if Christian Harris hasn't dealt with so many nagging like soft tissue injuries and things that just don't seem to heal up to keep him on the field, I think he would be potentially like more in the mix. And then bringing EJ Speed in to me just was like, this is a team that was starting Neville Hewitt in 2024, like legitimate snaps. So like I think D'Amico Ryans was like, we can't do that again. So he's just kind of picking up, scraps on the in free agency. And now you're in a 4 linebacker rotation. And when you got a guy who, I mean, we're talking 1 month, so 4 games. We got a guy who was playing 90% of snaps to go down to 41, and we're not talking about an injury. Like, it's crazy, right? Like, you know what I mean? Like, so yeah, I'm with you on this. Like, I like Aziz. Like, I think that's a guy that I'm starting every week. He's pretty matchup proof. I don't think you're going to get these double digit tackle games consistently, or he's not going to be exceeding his tackle prop every week. But I think he's going to get you 6 consistently, which for a linebacker, you're not terribly upset about that, especially based on his ADP. But yeah, the rest of that group is you're just hoping something like clears up. But I mean, if you're the guy rostering the linebacker twos there's a good chance you probably have 2 of the 3 of those guys to see who's going to get that, earn those snaps. And who knows, right? Like and again, it's crazy frustrating. And then it's almost like we look at linebacker sometimes as like almost like running back or wide receiver. When I have that extra flex spot, I'd like to start that linebacker. He's got a safe tackle floor. But when you're not even getting like the usage, I mean, you got 3 Lions players playing over 80 or 90% of the snaps. You can't even get 2 Texans players, right? Like, consistently at least. So it's it's a frustrating thing, and especially when this happens like a month into the season, because there's probably guys that are 3-1 at this point, maybe 4-0, and the linebacker 2 or 3 there is whoever the Texans are going to start, right? Like that takes a big toll on your team, because you can win games on defense too. I know it's not very popular, but we do it. So.
Yep. And the hard part here is to, when you said like the snap shares and everything like that, like, you're always going to pick the wrong one. You've got 3 players you're kind of debating between, and I have the unique superpower ability to pick the one player that will get single digits, and the 2 guys on the bench will have career games. I don't know how I do it. It's a gift. I got bit by the wrong spider, apparently, because my brother Peter got all these gifts and everything like that, and here I get the Captain Hindsight power that can't do anything. But anyway,
like an 80%
John,
chance
you
you're
got
picking the wrong guy.
Yeah. So you were kind of teasing this out a little bit earlier, like you're sitting there with your team right now. You're 4-0, maybe you're 3-1, you're 2-2, 1-3. Where are you at with like kind of like your roster? When are you like, this is the season, I'm going for it? What are you willing to do? If you're sitting here 2-2, where's your head at with some of these rosters you have, John?
Yeah, like my best advice, and I got to tell myself this sometimes too, is like just be honest with yourself, right? Like I think I sent out a tweet earlier. I got a 3-1 team right now. I'm literally starting Marcus Mariota and Mac Jones in a super flex tight end premium full IDP league. I shit you not, I do not have a starting quarterback in the NFL. I am relying on injuries to get me a startable quarterback. I do not do not recommend. 10 out of 10, do not recommend. But I have a
11
really
out of
strong
10.
defense. Yeah, I have a really strong defense, right? Like I got guys that are averaging over 20-25 points per game on defense, and it sucks, right? Because it just the other shoe's going to drop, and you're going to be that middling team that either just makes a playoff and the team that's playing you is like sweet bye week, or you're just missing the playoffs and you're stuck in that like 1-6 range of the rookie draft, and you're aggravated with yourself. But it is like, what are you willing to do to kind of like make that move, right? Like, so if you have a highly like, say you have good skill position players and a good defense in an ID like full IDP league like that, if these players that you're talking about are the Jack Campbells and the Quay Walkers and the Edrin Cooper type guys, you're not getting rid of those guys, right? Like, yes, they're highly performing and they're young players. it's hard to get rid of those guys. You wouldn't want to get rid of those guys. Like nobody's looking to sell Rome Odunze right now, right? Like, you know what I mean? Like, yeah, I mean, maybe somebody is like just to maximize draft capital because they don't believe or whatever. But like when guys like Brian Thomas and Brock Bowers break out a year ago, nobody's looking to sell those guys unless you're, really getting back, something that's like team changing, like right away, right? So I would say like just I'm very transparent in some of those. I had a trade offer today. It was like, hey, would you be looking to sell this player? I can give you this player and this player, and Byron Young's one, right? A guy who's just absolutely smashing right now. Yeah, I think you should give me this player and a first for him. No, right? Like I'm not comfortable enough with my roster to be giving up first round picks, first of all. And then like secondly is like, you know, these leagues that we're playing in, right? Like if the IDP scoring is high, if it's a super flex league, if it's a tight end premium league, those are the guys that everybody's trying to acquire. So when you have those guys, you gotta, you can't sit stagnant, but you also have to be very smart on the way you do it. Like some of the best players that I play against and with, when they rebuild, I tear that bitch down, right? Like, you know what I mean? Like it's everybody's gone, right? Like I want a quarter, if not more, of the first round this following year in the draft. I'm going to find a way to get that done. If you're not willing to do that and you want to just like nitpick and like, oh, well, I could sell, T Higgins right now, or I can get rid of, said player right now and get one first back or a couple seconds back, you're not doing a full rebuild, right? Like, so you gotta understand that you're gonna be like me in some of these leagues and finish in that 5-6 or just make it into the playoffs and hope something good happens. So I'm being honest with myself. 4 weeks is a little bit quick on the judgment. I typically am around like the 6-week mark, where if I do really want to do that fire sale, because even at the 4-week mark, to your point, a lot of those 2-2 guys still don't know what the hell's going on. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, but when you get into like the 6-game thing and it's like, all right, man, I'm 2-4, like, you know what I mean? I got to go on a 4-game run just to, get to a standing where I think I'm like, have a shot at the playoffs. When you guys got guys that are 0-3, they simply could get a player like Jaden Daniels back and go on a run, right? Like, so, I think like a week from now, 2 weeks from now is when you're really kind of looking at like, all right, look in the mirror, be honest with yourself. Who am I selling? Who am I looking to buy? What am I willing to give up? Right? Like when you're giving up a first 4 weeks into the season, and like you might be kicking yourself 2 weeks later when you lose 2 games in a row, right? And you're like, I just gave this guy what I thought was like at worst like 107, 110, and now it's like looking like 104.
Yep. And I think like you mentioned a lot of names, Walker, Odunze, those are like cornerstone pieces for to build around. Like they're young players, they're like those under 24, under 25 players. Those are the players to be building around, not be trading off. And I think, like you said, I was picturing you doing the meme about the guy with the mirror and he's standing there pointing at himself. That's what I was picturing you doing about your roster. But I
Pretty
think
accurate.
yeah, spot on, especially, because it's, like I know that you do, like people ask questions about your teams and stuff, and it's so easy to help other people out, or, we'll do the start and stuff, the start show and stuff like that. But it's so easy like to help other people out because you're just looking at it from like a value perspective. But when it's your team and you're having to make the decisions, it's like, I need some help. So I, ask around, even like, they're like, don't you do this? Isn't this your thing? And I'm like, yeah, but it's hard with my own team, because you're so close to it. And sometimes just having that outside perspective it's healthy and needed sometimes. So I like that. John, what are you working on right now? And where can the good folks who are listening find more of your work?
DynastyNerds.com. I am the IDP director over there. All the IDP content comes through me. So every Tuesday, we have the waiver wire article. Every Friday will be the start sit article. My IDP tiers, dynasty rankings, over 200 dynasty players for IDP only, is also up on Dynasty Nerds. The September update released, I think last week or the week before. The big project is the glossary. I did not name this. I just want to put that out there. But but it is a IDP Superflex tight end premium 500 plus players ranked, combined rankings, with some breakdowns, some trade advice. That was released in August. We'll be doing the September update is in process right now, so it's looking more like an early October update. My apologies, but 500 plus players, it gets lengthy. So that's kind of like my biggest thing going on over there. And also very, very soon we'll be dropping the IDP only 1 round mock, just to kind of get people ready for players to keep an eye on, right? When you're even guys that don't really love college football, you're going to turn on some of these primetime games when, the biggest teams are playing. It'd be nice to know some of those players for, kind of the casual fans and all that kind of stuff. So, and then, I know the IDP show is very helpful with this too. We do during the season and postseason, especially in the off season, some of those combined and IDP only mock drafts where I'm able to kind of get you guys involved and get some write-ups from you guys and some interest in what players that you like and why you like them. So that's like really one of the funnest projects that I work on every year. So there will be one of those, a couple of those coming out this year as well.
And what a great resource too, and I know like it's kind of a labor of love, and you said you have over 500 players in that. It's a great thing, like that we just got done mentioning, if you're a team that after like week 5, week 6, you're sitting there 2-4, 1-5, you take that hard look in the mirror and say, I'm a rebuilding team. That's a great resource to go. And those are the players to be attacking. Those are the players to be building on. If you can't get draft capital, get the little, maybe the proven player, a younger player that you can trade one of your higher pieces for, that's going to put a team over the top, but you can kind of capitalize on like, hey, you just suffered some injuries to Malik Neighbors and Tyreek Hill. I need a wide receiver. Hey, I can flip you a Keenan Allen. He's going to be great down the stretch. Let's get an Xavier Watson, a 3rd-round pick or something like that, just to kind of help rebuild your team, but then, make one of those teams push them over the top. Those are the kind of deals to get done. So, all right. Well, that's going to do it for this. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Sorry, man. That's probably the number one question I think I get. Why I decided to take on the project is, when we're talking about those guys that are asking you like, hey, John, what do you think about this trade? Or what do you think about this or that? You know what I mean? Like, or where do you start taking IDP in a startup draft? Like, right. I think this is kind of like my version as much as I can of giving you something that is like, hey, okay, Mason Taylor is kind of like in this tier. But also in that same tier, I'm looking at a rookie linebacker or a 2nd-year linebacker, right? Like, oh, so John doesn't feel like they're that far away, right? Like, so does that mean I can trade Edgerrin Cooper straight up for, the top tight end and tight end premium? Probably not, right? Like, right. So it's just kind of it's a good resource and something to kind of sometimes. I mean, I would say a majority of the time, a lot of the advice that is asked of me is like people have an idea what they want to do. They are kind of looking for you to confirm it or looking for some justification of like, oh, okay, why? Like I had a question come to me the other day and I didn't even know who the player was. And I'll let you know, like that's pretty alarming because I have a sickness where I tend to know like what high school guys went to. But I'm like going and looking and I'm like, yeah, I mean this guy plays more special team snaps than he does defensive snaps, right? Like, and I'm like, they're like, wow, I didn't know that, right? And I'm like, if you're rostering guys like that, right? Like, that's what I'm hoping a resource like this does is like, if this guy's supplying me 530 players and the guy I'm asking about is not on that list, probably a good chance I should drop him, right? Like, so,
right.
Just
he's number 540.
A lot of
he's 540.
Yeah, when there's free agents listed on this list that aren't on teams right now, like, what I mean? So,
high school sophomores are on the list actually right now. So,
but yeah,
that's good stuff. And like you said, like those preseason drafts and the mock drafts and stuff, those are such a great exercise too, just to get you ready for rookie drafts. And like you said, like the casual fan might not be into like those Devy leagues and not know those college players coming out. And, I know Carson Schwesinger, he was one of those players that was going into the 1st round, early 2nd for sure. And a lot of those drafts that we did. And, if you listen to the shows and read your articles, you got in on Carson Schwesinger and right now you're loving life, cause you got a young plug and play linebacker who's going to be there hopefully for a long time, not only for the Browns, but also for your fantasy team. So Good stuff as always, Jon. That's going to do it for this episode of the IDP After Show. I want to thank Jon once again for coming on and sharing some fantastic knowledge about the game we all love. Be sure to follow him and catch all of his great content that he does over at the Dynasty Nerds. Speaking of following, if you're not doing so already, please make sure you hit that like and subscribe button so we always know that you are aware of the great IDP content here at the IDP Show. So best of luck to you and your teams in Week 5, and I look forward to seeing you back here next week when Jace Abbey makes a return visit to the IDP Show for our Week 6 preview. Until then, for Jon and myself, we say thank you for joining us, and take care.
This was the IDP After Show.